Imagine this. You walk into your bank tomorrow morning, everything looks normal, same teller, same smile. But when you ask to withdraw your savings, the teller tells you your dollars are worth 30% less than they were yesterday. Not because of inflation, not because of a crash, but because overnight the world just decided your currency isn't worth what it used to be. Sounds impossible, right? Yet here's the crazy part. It's already happening. Right now in 2026, 10 countries representing 45% of the world's population just launched a global payment system, completely bypassing the US dollar. China alone has moved over $244 billion of trade with Russia out of dollars. And America's response? Print even more money. Pretend nothing's changing. This isn't speculation. This is the systematic unraveling of dollar dominance. And if you're not paying attention, you're about to watch your purchasing power vanish in real time. So what's really going on behind the scenes, and what are we missing? Stick with me, because the facts you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about global finance. Right now, you're probably thinking, this sounds like something that could never happen. But think again. This isn't just a few conspiracy theorists speculating. This is a major shift happening right in front of our eyes, and most people have no idea. The dollar, once the undisputed global reserve currency, is facing a challenge like never before. In 2026, 10 countries representing nearly half of the world's population launched a system designed to sideline the US dollar. This is the beginning of a new economic era, and the shift is already happening. China, Russia, India, they're not just talking about this, they're acting. Over half of China's international payments have already moved away from the dollar, including $244 billion worth of trade with Russia. That's not a small amount. It's a massive chunk of global commerce. And what's America doing in response? Printing more dollars, ignoring the writing on the wall. So what does this mean for you, the average American? Why should you care? Well, this is just the beginning of a much larger trend. A trend that, if it continues, will fundamentally change the way you live. The dollar's grip on global finance is weakening. But how did we get here? Now, let's talk about the proof. The hard evidence that this isn't just talk. You might think, sure, a few countries are testing alternatives, but the dollar still dominates. Well, it's true that the dollar still holds a powerful position. But here's the catch. The shift is happening, and it's accelerating. In 2024, China switched more than half of its international payments to the yuan. This isn't some distant future scenario. It's real, and it's happening right now. And it doesn't stop there. Brazil and China signed trade deals to bypass the dollar entirely. India, too, is setting up systems to trade in rupees, not dollars. These are not just isolated events. They're calculated moves by nations positioning themselves for a future without dollar dependency. The real kicker? The dollar's share of global payments has already dropped to 47.04%. Just 2 years ago, it was at 51.74%. That's a massive decline in a very short time. Meanwhile, the yuan's share has jumped to 4.61%. These aren't small shifts. They're signals that something much bigger is unfolding. So what does this mean for you? Simple. The dollar's strength is built on a foundation of trust, but as countries move away from it, that trust is starting to erode, and once it's gone, it's gone. The dollar isn't just another currency, it's the lifeblood of the global economy. When that lifeblood starts to drain, the entire system begins to shake. And if America doesn't change course, the collapse is inevitable. But here's where it gets really serious. As these nations quietly ditch the dollar, the ripple effect is already being felt. Think back to October 2024, when the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and others, came together at their summit in Kazan, Russia. They didn't just talk about alternatives to the dollar. No, they announced a plan, a concrete one. They revealed the BRICS Bridge payment system designed to connect over 30 nations. This isn't some distant theoretical project. It's already in the works, with testing set to begin as soon as 2025. Now, let's put this into perspective. The dollar used to settle nearly 96% of international trade in the Americas. Today, it's already being treated as optional by half the world. half. This is no longer a what-if situation. It's happening. The dollar is being sidelined by nations who have strategically positioned themselves for this moment. And what's America doing? Ignoring it. Acting like it's not happening, but it's getting worse fast. If this continues, the consequences could be catastrophic. The dollar's collapse won't be slow. It will happen quickly, in months, not decades. And here's where the real danger lies. When a currency collapses, the country that issues it doesn't just lose its financial power, it loses everything: geopolitical relevance, military reach, cultural influence. Everything that's built on that currency's supremacy starts to disintegrate. And America is walking the same path that every other fallen empire has walked before. Here's the hard truth. The evidence is stacking up, and it's worse than you think. America is not prepared for what's coming. The shift away from the dollar is gaining steam, and we're already seeing the consequences. In 2024, while the U.S. focused on its own problems, Russia and China made a decisive move. 93% of their bilateral trade is now settled in rubles and yuan, not dollars. That's $244 billion in trade, all outside the dollar system. And it doesn't stop there. As of December 2024, China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, is now processing $80 billion per day. That's nothing compared to the $5 trillion processed daily by SWIFT, but it's enough for China to survive sanctions and thrive without relying on the dollar. Meanwhile, the dollar's share of global reserves continues to plummet, from 71% in 2000 to 41% in 2024. This is not a blip. It's a trend, and it's accelerating. The decline is faster than anyone predicted. What does this mean for you? It means that the very foundation of your financial system is starting to crack. And the question is, how long can we ignore the obvious? And this is where things get really dangerous. The situation isn't just a slow decline anymore. It's an avalanche of crises, one after another. In 2024, China, Russia, and India didn't just shift their trade away from the dollar. They began building the infrastructure to replace it entirely. The BRICS Bridge system, it's not just a concept, it's a direct challenge to the dollar's dominance, and it's already in motion. But it's not just the big players making moves. Indonesia, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, countries that once relied on the dollar, are now exploring alternatives. Indonesia signed a $25 billion deal with India to settle trades in their local currencies. Saudi Arabia, once the backbone of the petrodollar system, is now considering joining the BRICS. What happens if this continues? What happens if more countries that represent half the world's population, decide the dollar isn't worth the risk? If this trend escalates, America won't just lose financial influence, it will lose its position in the global order. The dollar's collapse won't be gradual, it will be rapid. And once that momentum hits, the world's financial system will be thrown into chaos. We've seen it before with the British pound, with the Soviet ruble, and history is repeating itself. Now let's step back for a second. This isn't just some abstract economic theory. This is real, and it's happening to people like you. You might think this is just something for the elites or the ultra-wealthy to worry about, but the truth is, this will affect every single person in the world, including you. Imagine waking up one day and seeing your savings lose value because the dollar isn't trusted anymore. Imagine watching prices rise uncontrollably, your pension or retirement account lose all its value overnight. This isn't some far-off doomsday scenario. This is what happens when a currency collapses, and it's already starting to happen. People in countries like Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Argentina have lived through this. In fact, it's happening right now in places where inflation is out of control, and people are scrambling just to buy food. And here's the hard truth. While these countries are already feeling the effects, Americans, especially the middle class, are dangerously unaware. The wealthiest will always find ways to protect themselves. They'll move their assets overseas, invest in gold, or find new financial systems to escape the dollar's decline. But the middle class, they'll be left holding the bag, watching their savings and assets evaporate before their eyes. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments. You're not alone in noticing the patterns. Now let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about a few countries abandoning the dollar. This is a systemic issue, a flaw at the core of the global financial system. Think about it. For decades, the dollar has been the world's reserve currency. But reserve currencies don't hold that position by accident. It takes a delicate balance of trust, military power, and economic strength. The United States held all those cards until now. What you're seeing isn't just the dollar weakening, it's the world's most powerful economies building alternatives. Because they know that relying on the dollar isn't just a financial risk, it's a geopolitical vulnerability. Remember the 2022 Russian sanctions? When the US and Europe froze $300 billion in Russian foreign reserves, that wasn't just a political move, it was a warning shot. It made countries realize we could be next. Suddenly, the global reliance on the dollar didn't seem so safe anymore. It's not just fear of U.S. sanctions, it's fear of instability, fear of political chaos. Countries are no longer willing to tie their fate to American fiscal decisions, interest rate hikes, or political gridlock. The weaponization of the dollar as a tool of power has made it more dangerous than ever. And now those same countries are putting their money into alternatives. This is the unsettling reality. We've reached a tipping point where America's once unshakable economic might is now viewed as a risk, a liability. And the very infrastructure that kept the dollar on top is now being quietly dismantled. So, where does this leave us? The future is anything but certain, but one thing is clear: the next few years will determine the dollar's fate. We could be looking at two possible paths. Either America pulls off a miracle and manages to restore fiscal discipline, or the dollar spirals downward as the world shifts to alternatives. On one hand, America could attempt to stabilize. It could drastically cut spending, raise taxes, and push through dramatic reforms. But we've seen how hard that is, especially when the country is already drowning in debt. The Congressional Budget Office projects that by 2050, interest payments alone could consume nearly 40% of all federal revenue. Think about that, almost half of every tax dollar going toward paying off the debt. That's unsustainable. On the other hand, if this trajectory continues, the situation could get much worse, much faster. The BRICS nations are steadily building their own infrastructure, and their payment systems will soon be robust enough to handle a significant portion of global trade. Meanwhile, central banks around the world are hoarding gold, preparing for the day the dollar falters. Once that tipping point hits, the consequences will be immediate, with capital flight accelerating and the dollar's collapse becoming painfully obvious. We're at a crossroads. The next few years will either be a time of reckoning or a last-ditch effort at reform. And no matter which path America chooses, the world is already moving away from the dollar. The question isn't whether it will happen, it's when and how fast. Here's the brutal truth. Reserve currency status is a privilege, it's not a given, and it requires fiscal discipline, political stability, and above all, trust. America used to have all three. But now, all of them are eroding. The dollar's dominance is no longer a certainty. And while America continues to bury its head in the sand, China, Russia, and India are preparing for what's coming next. The window to act is closing fast. History shows us that once a reserve currency loses its trust, it doesn't just collapse overnight, it implodes. And by the time the world wakes up to the fact that the dollar is no longer reliable, it will be too late to protect your wealth. The wealthy will already have moved their assets, and the middle class will watch as their savings, homes, and futures lose value before their eyes. This isn't just a financial crisis. It's a geopolitical one. The global financial system is shifting, and America is no longer the uncontested leader. China, Russia, and India aren't laughing because they're winning. They're laughing because they're prepared for what's coming. The question isn't whether the dollar will face a major transition. The question is, will you be ready when it happens? If you've made it this far, you're already seeing the signs. This isn't fear-mongering, it's the hard truth. Follow for more updates because the story isn't over, it's just beginning.